Welcome to the Dear Dyslexic podcast, where lived experience meets real conversation. We shine a light on the stories that need to be heard, with honest and inspiring conversations with people with dyslexia and other neurodivergent conditions like dyscalculia, dysgraphia, ADHD, and autism. The Dear Dyslexic podcast is more than just a show. It's a community, a space for connection, and a movement to rethink dyslexia. Subscribe today and join us on our journey, one story at a time. When you were talking about giving feedback, or when you've gotten feedback in the past, we're often asked now around, particularly with people with ADHD or ADHD and autism, around rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria. I don't know if that was a term that you've heard of. It's used a lot now. So when people are getting feedback, sometimes they misconstrued it, or misconstrued is not the right word, but for them, it might be extra sensitive, or it feels a lot more critical to them than the manager giving that feedback. And like, for an example, when not that I have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, but when I'm given papers and they're covered in red marks from my manager, and then it's like talked about in an open planned office how it was not very well put together, there's lots of mistakes, blah, blah, blah. Because of my trauma of school, then my response could appear to be overreacting or aggressive or rude, or I'm so emotional because I couldn't take that feedback. So we hear when we're working that sometimes giving that constant feedback can make people feel even more insecure or uncertain about themselves because of their neurodivergence. Have you come across that in the past?
Yeah, it's a really good point. That I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that you talked about there. One about how feedback is given, and then one about how I have come up with giving or asking or checking in a lot. Now, I've had this both in my personal life and in my work environment. So I think it comes back to my first point about great leadership. So great leadership will not be giving feedback in an open plan environment and singling out people. To me, that's not great leadership. Great leadership will be saying to people, how I mark up documents, whether it be in track changes or not. This is how it works for me. And the system comes up in red pen. Is that a trigger? I know it seems a bit, I've actually said to people, I use red pen because it shows up well on the paper for me, but I can use green pen. Is that a trigger for you? I know that it's a trigger for me. The word processor uses red in terms of its
Default.
track changes. Do you want me to change the color for you? And I think as a leader, having those informal, quick conversations about how you proofread and make edits to things on a one-to-one basis, or perhaps with the team, it might be in a team meeting when you're talking about a peer-to-peer review process, that it's a 360-degree process. It's not about judging. It's about helping each other. It's about catching each other. It's about having each other's back. It's not about calling out mistakes. Even though that might be part of the process, it's about making sure that everyone is felt supported and we have each other's backs. So for me, that's the first thing, to your point about great leadership and how to give feedback. And I'm changing in workforce. Recently, I worked with Libby O'Loughlin, who's a great consultant based out of the NT, who works a lot on personality when working with teams. And Libby O says, right, let's change the word from feedback to advice. Let's to ask people for their advice because they're experts and we're all adults. Secondly, I would say let's check in and keep catch an environment, particularly for neurodiverse people. I have known by constantly and witness by constantly checking in with people can increase anxiety levels. So ask, and you can see people fidget, you can see them sweat. And it might not just be people from neurodiverse backgrounds, it might be anyone, and you don't necessarily know what the triggers are. For me, checking in is important to understand, have I set the environment right for people? However, when I notice, and it's active listening, so looking at all the psychosocial cues and environmental cues and physical cues. Uh, and when I notice those changing, saying, look, I'm setting an environment of safety here. There's no wrong answers, but you tell me how you would like things to be. So, for example, in my personal life, I mentioned earlier that I dated someone with autism. At the beginning, I would check in with them very frequently. Is the sound okay in here? Is the temperature okay? Is the lighting okay? And it would actually increase their anxiety levels. So I've said, I then found a place to say, you make yourself at home and you tell me, you have permission to tell me when things are not working for you. And that's okay.
And that's a nice way to be working in a work environment, isn't it? As a manager, you tell me when things are not working rather than us always telling people when it's not working for us.
Yeah, correct. And I think it's that one of the factors I call adult to adult relationships. You know, okay, there are different levels of stages of growth and stages of brain development, and as a leader, you need to understand those and be able to reach people in those levels. But again, it's about setting an environment where people feel safe to have conversations with you, where they can then say, this is working for me, this isn't working for me, these are the things that I need to do, without fear of retribution. For example, wearing headphones like you're wearing today.
Which I hate.
Um,
Can't get my Bluetooth to work.
which which might be okay. I remember working in a work environment where there was a policy that you couldn't wear
Mm,
your
yeah,
earbuds in the
yeah.
workplace. And and look, there may be environments where that is a safety hazard.
Mm,
So on a factory floor, for example.
yeah. Or on the tools.
However, it then becomes down to, how do you create the environment that is appropriate for the environment that your people are working in?
So, how important do you think training is? Because you were talking about the trigger of the red pen, and you might do that instinctively because you're dyslexic and you know that red pen may be a trigger for somebody. And so you're doing all these things naturally, partly because of your neurodivergence, partly because you're an amazing leader and you've done all this additional training. So, where do you see a gap at at the moment around leadership's understanding of neurodivergence, and where do you think the training needs to come in so that it's a bit more intuitive, or that there's more thought put in, like we were talking about with the pen, because not everyone's going to think that red pen is a trigger.
That's true. Look, I suppose I'm biased in the sense of my experiences in life and my training in life. I've been fortunate to have a lot of experience and a lot of training. I would answer that question by saying you don't know what you don't know, and education helps you understand better some cases that you don't know much at all, but it helps you understand more. And I think it's incumbent, it's critical, it's important for organisations and senior leadership to ensure that their people leaders are well trained, well versed in managing people. And it's probably the hardest thing in the workplace to do is to manage people, because you may have all of the models and frameworks, but every person is different, and no, there is no set rule, but there are general guidelines and guardrails. And I think if you understand how people function psychologically, socially, and emotionally, you understand how your teams work in terms of group think, you understand what is a fixed mindset and what is a growth mindset, and then what you understand about the neurodiverse symptoms or diagnoses and how best to manage them makes you not only a better person, but a better leader. And at the end of the day, designing better commercial outcomes for the organization. So productivity is higher, engagement and satisfaction of employees and customers is higher, so your NPS score and your employment as employee satisfaction scores are higher, therefore your bottom line revenue, profit, and margins are going to be better.
And it's funny you say that. It's a nice way for us to start to wrap up because often we get asked by the finance person or someone in exec sitting in the back row, but how does this help us make money?
Yeah, well, look, I saw a great uh, diagram about change management in the workforce, which I have to send to you. But essentially, it said we need to get a project manager in or a behavioural change scientist in to redesign this change. Oh, the existing project manager can do it. Um, then there's a time frame of which the project manager does it, and oh shit, we actually need the professional in to do it. And oh shit, it's actually cost us more time and money than what we expected by having an initial outlay of having the training or the professional in, or actually making the time at the beginning of the process. So I would say that your bottom line is affected by not doing it properly in the first place.
And so, for those listening out there who might have thought it was a nice to have or nice to do, we're really hopefully this conversation's shifting that to it's not a nice ticker box. It's actually works for everybody in many, many positive ways financially, emotionally, psychologically, the whole circle.
Well, and now legislatively as well.
Yes.
So there are legislation and regulation that are moving towards similar legislation around sexual orientation, around gender, around bullying, toxic workplaces, and sexual harassment. So not only do we have a regulatory obligation as organisations, as leaders, we have an obligation under workplace safety for our employees to ensure that we have psychologically safe workplaces for people and people from neurodiverse and dyslexic backgrounds.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a great conversation because I think it's the tip of the iceberg. And though everyone's at risk of being in a workplace that's not psychologically safe, we know that neurodivergent people are at greater risk when we don't have the right supports, leadership, training, tools, strategies, and environments that help suit our needs. But generally, they're factors that will help create an inclusive environment for everyone. The universal design principles, generally, we'd like to talk about. If everyone gets access to something, then everyone can work in a better way. So I think it's been such a great conversation. And I feel like we need to have a follow up because we didn't even get to touch on when people don't feel safe to disclose and what workplaces could be doing. And when we don't know if someone's neurodivergent, but they show some traits, like how do we support them. And I think that would be a really great conversation to have you back on for as well.
I'd be delighted to come back and talk about some of the things that I've observed, the ways in which I've managed people with those backgrounds in psycho and creating psychologically safe work environments, and also talking about structure versus creativity. So, with my neurodiverse background and dyslexia, I need to have a lot of structure, system, and process in place. However, that doesn't necessarily work for people from a creative background. And I work in marketing and branding and work with a lot of creatives. So, how do we find that balance? And you've worked with Dr. Kim Percy in the play, and she comes from a creative background, and we found a way of working really well together. So, I look forward to coming back and talking more about that too.
Yeah, that would be great because we didn't touch on, which was one of my threads in my brain that dropped off, was around as a neurodivergent manager, what do we need to do to make sure that we are not impacting our teams because of the way we work and do things? And I loved when we were working on the project the other week, you said that, sometimes it's flying a plane while you're still building it. And I've just loved that saying so much because I'm not a process person. I just like to sit and create, and then try to bring people around to help me then implement what I'm trying to create and to understand what I'm trying to create. And even though my role for many years was project management, which is all process, but I still got to create things, I think. But yes, so I work very, very differently to you. And so it would be very good. And maybe we could get Kim on and we could talk about how that works, the three of us in different ways, because we do present differently and
I
just
think
like
that'd be a
everyone.
great conversation, and I
Mm.
feel our audience will really learn a lot from that.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank you, everyone, for listening today, because this is a huge topic that we're seeing now that it's become legislated in Queensland. I think, oh, sorry, New South Wales. Victoria's just brought in the legislation. There's a lot of information on the work health safety sites around general psychological safety in the workplace and what that looks like. And again, Google if you need more information around those terms, but also that this is the beginning of a lot of the work that we're starting to do to ensure that neurodivergent people are safe in the workplace. It's what we've been doing for a while now, but now we've got some real frameworks to help us guide some of these conversations in the workplace. So stay tuned. And if you're really interested about this topic, please leave a comment or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you and to get your thoughts on this topic as it grows and develops in time. But for now, thank you so much, Ben, for you coming on the show, not for me having been on your show. You can see my brain slowing down. And yes, let's organize that next podcast. That would be awesome. Thank you.
And I would say to everyone out there, check out the website Rethink Dyslexia.
Thanks so much, Ben. And thanks everyone for listening. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
If you haven't done so already, make sure you sign up to our mailing list so you can keep up to date with everything we are doing at Rethink Dyslexia. So head to rethinkdyslexia.com.au. And don't forget, if there's anything you heard today that was distressing, you can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Beyond Blue on 1300 22 46 36. Thanks for listening and bye for now.